Now we'll have the floor open for Dr. Sean Carr. He will be speaking about leveraging intangible assets.
Pleasure to see you all, and thank you very much to our host, to King Fahd University, and to many others who made this possible. I'd also like to pay my compliments to Dr. Waila Musa and the selection committee for putting together this selection of speakers, at least those that I've seen today. Brilliantly done, because everyone's views are rather consonant with one another, and I think what I'm about to say, at least I hope what I'm about to talk about in a moment, will in effect complement some of the ideas you've already heard from some of our people this morning. So my name is Sean Carr. I'm the executive director of the Baton Institute. It's the Center for Entrepreneurship and Innovation, which is housed at the Graduate Business School at the University of Virginia. I'll tell you a bit more about who we are and some of the things we're doing a little bit later on. I'd like to start, though, because all of us are wrestling with this big question, and a lot of people are wrestling with this question of what does it take for a nation, an entire nation, to foster a robust entrepreneurial ecosystem. We talk about that for a region. There's lots of research and policy making being done at the regional level and certainly at the city level across the country, in our country, but certainly around the world. But what I find so interesting and compelling about the focus of this forum is that we really want to talk about, at least I'd like to talk about, what it takes for a university to be a mechanism for reinforcing, fostering, developing an entrepreneurial ecosystem. And what I'm going to do is actually have you think about that from two perspectives. What is the role, and we've talked about this today already, what is the role of the of the university for affecting the ecosystem more broadly, sort of outside of its walls, outside of the ivory tower? But I'd also like to use this opportunity to think about what it takes to create that ecosystem intramurally. What's happening inside the walls of the university, and some things we ought to consider. Many of which we've talked about this morning, but I'm going to talk about a few other things today which we haven't discussed directly, and so let me get to that. Now, the framing for this, and I'd like to give some credit to my colleague and mentor, Sankaran Venkatraman, who is on our faculty, who proposed some of these ideas about a decade ago, but I'd like to extend it now to the university setting. Now, he talked about taking a page from Clay Christensen's notion of sustaining versus disruptive innovations, sustaining entrepreneurship, sort of in any culture, in any society, even the most tradition-bound, hide-bound, those that value and respect tradition are often resistant to change, but there's still entrepreneurship happening at some level. Small businesses, retail, mom-and-pop shops. That's the environment I'd like to talk about first, sustaining entrepreneurship. What happens there? Well, you do tend to have in these societies, in these environments, they may be large, they may be small, but ultimately some successful institutions that dominate the conversation. Those successful institutions, they have leaders, they have people who emerge through them, who then become role models for others, for the youth coming up. We talk a lot about the youth coming up in this society. They become the role models. They have those become the desired roles, there's status associated with it. They attract the best talent, they attract critical resources, and it results in kind of people tend to want to either work within these large organizations or go into a bureaucratic structure or go to some institution as opposed to doing something really path-breaking. Yet entrepreneurship, new things, new ventures crop up, and it's a kind of a low-level sustaining kind of entrepreneurship. And in this culture where the large organizations are the model, there's an intolerance for failure, a risk aversion, as we talked about already. Perfecting something is the ideal. Don't take too many risks, because if you've already figured out what this society ought to be doing, then let's not rock the boat. And then you kind of get to this cycle. Now, this is not necessarily a bad thing. There are lots of cultures and societies and economies that operate in this way very well. But there's a downside to this, and there's a downward pull that can happen. If you have what I just described in that sustaining entrepreneurial environment, it's a pretty weak entrepreneurship culture. As a result, you then have fewer startup opportunities emerging. There's less capital flowing to these ideas. Capital starts to go elsewhere to fund things. Entrepreneurship, as a result, because there's less happening, there's less capital available, becomes an even riskier proposition. And so in an environment where risk is not tolerated, that becomes an even worse problem. There is a corresponding fear of failure. And then people do go into entrepreneurship, but they tend to be pushed into it because perhaps they have no other options, rather than pulled into it because of the excitement, the energy, the opportunity to do something really path-breaking. And as a result, you kind of have low-quality firms. Entrepreneurship has a low status, so then young people don't really attracted to it. They're still more attracted to more high-status roles in this kind of society. So again, I've just described kind of what we see in lots of places around the world and even around the United States. So what does it take to reverse that? And we've talked about a number of things that are being done, can be done, to reverse that downward spiral. But what does it take to create, not just to reverse the spiral, but to do something different, to actually create a cycle of disruptive, we talked earlier about Joseph Schumpeter, disruptive Schumpeterian entrepreneurship. What does it take to unleash that perennial gale of creative destruction? Now, typically when we reach this challenge, we're faced with this challenge, and I think we heard this morning that that is a fundamental challenge now here in the kingdom. We talk about intervention, some kind of top-down, usually governmental intervention. And those tend to address what I'll refer to here as the tangibles of entrepreneurship. And let's look at those for a moment. They tend to fall in three basic buckets. You have financial, more policy-oriented, or they have something to do with legal systems, and infrastructure. These are things that governments tend to do. Sometimes they do it well, sometimes they do it not so well, but this is what they can focus on. And so let's say you're talking about a region, you can find ways to provide access to capital markets, providing small business loans. On the policy side, you can change the tax structure. You can reduce regulatory burdens, maybe making it even easier to start a business. And also with infrastructure, better communication, better transportation, better ways for people to get services to market. But what about within the university? Because as I said, this is a conversation about what needs to happen in the university. Well, in this ecosystem, there are tangibles there too, and we've heard a number of things that are being done at some of the institutions we've heard from this morning about financially, direct grants, investments. We heard about an investment fund here, and there are several. Even drawing in external risk capital. You can make very big commitments from the top at an organization like a university in that regard. There are policy decisions. We just heard about these issues of policy and how you protect intellectual property and what is the system for patents and royalties. And I didn't even put up here, what are the incentives for faculty to engage in some kind of entrepreneurial activity? Is there a tech transfer system that makes it conducive for them to take ideas that they have, others in their lab or their faculty to bring them to market? And then there's infrastructure, tech transfer offices, a licensing office, incubators, accelerators. In many ways, these are the things that sort of can be done from the top down. They are necessary. They're table stakes. But what I'd like to argue here is that they are necessary but not sufficient. What is necessary, and to make it sufficient, are the intangibles of entrepreneurship. And let me walk through a few of these ideas. And then I'm going to follow this with an example of some of the things that have been happening at our university that maybe illustrate the kind of thing I'm talking about. First, you want to have, I call them idea nodes. If you're thinking about this in a region, right, we have talked a lot about the power of the university itself as being a node for new ideas, a place to go if you want to find a new technology or a new invention or a new way of thinking about some process that then can ultimately be commercialized. But think about this in terms of the university setting itself. Where are the nodes within the university environment for getting great ideas? Perhaps it's the engineering department, but what about within the engineering department? Are there groups of people? Do they congregate somewhere? Where, if you just walked into the institution as I have today, not knowing the first thing about it, where would I go to say, hey, where are the best ideas coming from? That ought to be known. What is that? Now, it's an intangible thing. It's hard to get one's head around, but you want to know where those places are and be able to communicate about them. Who are the role models? I talked about the importance of role models. Are there people within the university setting who are acclaimed for their success? Maybe they've become wealthy or maybe they haven't, but at least they're known for pushing the envelope, getting ideas outside of the four walls of the university, taking it to a market, working across the campus with other departments and other faculties and other students. A third one I'd like to point out, informal forums. That's a very broad way of talking about, oh, I don't know, a coffee shop, a tea house, places where people, particularly young people, go and hang out and share ideas. It's part of, we talk about changing the culture, but if you want people to engage on these issues, I mean, this is a great forum. It's actually called a forum. But are there, this is a rather formal one, but are there informal forums? I mean, the discussions we're having in here are excellent. I'm sure there will be even more excellent conversation happening over lunch and at coffee. That's what I mean. I mean, how are there places within the institution that foster that? I call this last one, or this next one, organic ideas. What I really mean by that is, are the ideas that are coming out of a region or a university, are they somehow idiosyncratic to that institution? Do they take advantage of the unique advantages, competitive advantages that institution may have in the greater world? It's, not everyone can be Stanford or Caltech or come up with the ideas that are coming out of there because they have unique attributes. What is it, are the ideas that are being promoted and put forth and then ultimately funded and developed, do they have something that really speaks to what that institution is all about, that really perhaps speaks to what its central mission is? Are there safety nets? Are faculty, students even, somehow protected? Do they have a backup? Now, in the United States, we have a tenure system which provides lifetime employment for those who have achieved it and earned it. They are protected in that regard, but do they still have the flexibility to get time out from teaching or other research responsibilities to pursue these ideas? What are the, if there's such a high degree of fear of failure, maybe there is no safety net. Maybe it's just too dangerous to step outside of a lab or other research activities to actually try something. So are there systems in place that allow that to happen? And then next are what I call gateways to markets. Is there a path through the university, either through partnerships or others in that ecosystem, external or internal, that allow you to sell a good, provide a service, really be able to commercialize something that makes it easy? But it's markets I'd like you to think about in the very broadest sense, not just a market to be sold to, but also a market to engage with. Because the market is an opportunity for you to help develop your idea. You co-develop with the people and institutions to whom you would like to sell. So you need to have some way to engage with them beyond just a formal selling mechanism. It's also a market for ideas. There's a social network of people that you want to be able to provide people from your institution, provide them access to. And lastly, the seventh, I'd like to highlight the importance of executive leadership. Clearly this morning we've heard from senior leaders, the rector, and others here at King Fahd University who have provided great vision and great commitment. That is, and having a visionary leader is so essential to kind of pointing the direction to where the institution and to where individuals should go and how they should spend their time. But you also need what I want you to think of as executive leadership. Do you have also, in a complementary sense, people who are willing to take off the jackets, roll up their sleeves, and really get the job done? I'd venture to say Dr. Wael Musa is one of those people, but from what I've got to know. But I think you need people like that sprinkled around the organization, and if you don't have them, then try to attract them and seek out those individuals who are very practically oriented in making this ecosystem thrive. So again, the foundation is there. It does not make any of these other things that are being done, tech transfer offices, new policies, access to capital, funding, any less important. They are really at the foundation of anything that must go on. But I'd also like you to think about some of these other opportunities to help the ecosystem grow. And then in the next few minutes, I'll just describe, maybe to put some skin on the bones, give an example of maybe some things that are happening at the University of Virginia. So as I say, I'm with the Baton Institute. We were established about 13 years ago with a large grant to the university to enable the University of Virginia and the Darden School of Business to be a thought leader and preeminent educator in entrepreneurship and innovation. So we have this dual mission, which we take great pride in. So we seek to improve society by, one, advancing knowledge about the transformative power of entrepreneurship and innovation, and by cultivating principled entrepreneurial leaders. And we do that through three different mechanisms. One is our Center for Entrepreneurial Leadership, where we run a variety of competitions. We have an incubator. We have an innovation lab, which I'll describe in a moment. We have a very important commitment to intellectual capital and research. We have a fellows program. We have a grant program which we provide across the university, again, all in areas related to entrepreneurship and innovation. And then we seek outreach through our publications, through events, through public policy, and the like. Roughly, this is about, just to put some numbers to things so you have a sense of who we are in that sense. So we have a roughly $100 million endowment. We have a $4.8 million operating budget each year. We spend $1 million on scholarships, $184,000 in venture internships. We provide funding to students who want to work in a startup. Doesn't it mean that a startup has anything to do with UVA? It could be somewhere else in the ecosystem. What we want to give them the ability to provide them that pathway to get out and working in startup in a new venture. We've had a number of new ventures that have come through our incubator, but we support publications. There are the grants I referred to, direct faculty support. And we've been doing this for about 12 or 13 years, and we've increasingly been getting ranked along the dimension of entrepreneurship, we being the Darden School, and we now have a number 5 ranking. Someday we'll get there, Babson, but you're way ahead of us. A number 5 ranking for our MBA program in entrepreneurship. A series of research initiatives that focus on these particular areas, emerging markets, organic growth, and the like. I won't get into that in too much detail. And these are some of the things that we do. So I'm pointing all this out to illustrate in a broad sense some of the ways we have tried to engage with the university ecosystem in a very meaningful way. So we host, we do partnerships. You'll hear from Dr. Carlson from engineering, and we've reached out to that school and others at UVA to really put partnerships together. Maybe it's just to talk. Next week we're doing a tech venture fair, which is in partnership with the business school and the engineering school. We do something called the Jefferson Innovation Summit, which is an opportunity to speak to policymakers in Washington and around the world. Again, we want to touch as many different aspects of entrepreneurship and the ecosystem as we can. But here's one example where I think it might make the most, might be most meaningful. So 2 years ago, we launched something called the Innovation Lab, or the iLab. It is, in effect, a partnership launched out of the Darden School, but really is a partnership for all of the university. So it's not just a business school thing. It is really in partnership with 11 other schools at the university. It is a university-based hub for coaching, mentoring, developing new ideas. It houses, it is not the incubator, but has within it an incubator. It has classroom space. We provide funds, Bernie's directly involved with this, funds for new courses in entrepreneurship across the university, wherever they may be. So, you know, what we've tried to do is sort of use this as a mechanism, this iLab, and I'll show you some images in a moment, as a way to engage the rest of the community in getting excited about entrepreneurship, getting excited about helping students, working with faculty, and getting others, mentors from around the community, and in some cases from around the country, involved in what we're doing. So 3 years ago, this was a unused faculty dining facility, which, you know, we said, well, no one's using it. Let's see if we could take a little bit of money and put it into this and create something new. And it has now become the Iliff. So the first thing I want to point out, that's a picture of the first thing we knew we needed to have was a coffee shop. The lobby is now that's the day it opened, but the lobby is now, you know, teeming with students from the business school, from the law school, from elsewhere around grounds, because the coffee's pretty good. And there are snacks, and people just like to talk about ideas. And when we have our entrepreneurs in residence who spend, you know, 1 day a week or 1 day a month in residence here, that's where they hang out. They don't have offices. Their office is that. And it actually has made a difference. That's more typical of what the place is like when it's filled. This is the incubator space. So just adjacent to that room is this larger space, and each of those tables is one of our 25 startup ventures, which is in there right now. And this was a game changer for us. We've moved up from having, 8 or so new ventures a year to 25, almost overnight. And the biggest thing about this change, this is our pitch room, which is next to the incubator, where we do our pitch competitions. We invite venture capitalists and other investing professionals in to hear pitches from the new ventures that are in there. This is dedicated classroom space. In a business school, we operate in, we typically use these tiered classrooms, which aren't really good for engaging in innovation and putting up things on the walls. This is the place for us to do that. This is where new businesses often get hatched before they wind up in the incubator. And then in the back room, we have a prototyping room. This now houses a 3D printer. We also have a number of other technologies, tools, basically for students and faculty to build prototypes of the things they might like to develop. A media room for doing Skype calls. And again, more place for convivial engagement. This is what I meant by the intangibles. We can make bets in all of these ways. We can provide funding and change policies and encourage a top-down embrace of entrepreneurial ideas and activity, and that is fundamental. But this other stuff, which is just harder to get your hands around. At MIT, right, there are students kind of hanging out 2 o'clock in the morning, just working together. There are things we can do to facilitate that. At some places, Silicon Valley, was a 40 or 50-year process for it to become what it was to what it is today. Was it by chance or was it by design? It's hard to say. But I think there are things that can be done by design to encourage that kind of activity, even in the university environment. And as Dr. Strom said, here at King Fahd, you have this opportunity because you are still young, because you still don't have centuries of systems in place to actually make change and to make deliberate bets along some of these dimensions. And just a few lessons about what we've done. So we have found that growing the entrepreneurial ecosystem in Charlottesville, which is where we're located, it's about 2 hours from DC, really matters. What did we do? The incubator is not just for ventures from UVA. It's actually open to anyone in the community. So, we give first priority to UVA-based or Darden-based ventures, but by getting entrepreneurs or would-be entrepreneurs from outside, inside, has been a fundamental change, because these entrepreneurs from the outside, that's actually what they do. They're not students and something else. They are the something else all the time. And it has actually increased the activity, the focus, and it brought more knowledge into the incubator. Even though it's a university incubator, we have a very different model. We're there to teach, to educate, to provide experience. We're not, sort of in the business. We want them to be successful, but we also have an obligation to help them learn. But by engaging the community has been a big part of being successful in this regard. Well, I'll stop there, and I'm mindful of the time, but I'm happy to take any questions if you have any. But thank you for listening.
Okay, thank you very much. And I think we have some time for questions, comments from the audience. So please.
Thank you so much. Being a graduate from UVA, I would like to ask the first question here.
Great.
Is the iLab to resolve the problem of Darden School is for graduate school, and the iLab, you want to increase the community by talking to undergraduates through iLab?
Yes, and then I'll answer your question with a little bit more amplification on just that. So go Who's. So what you'll hear, and I think Bernie will talk about this in his remarks as well, is that there are these pockets, these nodes, as I referred to earlier, of entrepreneurial activity happening all over at UVA. We don't say campus, we say grounds. So all over grounds. There's something happening at the engineering school. There's something off grounds in this sort of small commercial district that's just across the street from the university. It's called Hack-Seville. Seville is short for Charlottesville. Hack-Seville. It's basically a little facility for programmers to get together and hack new ideas and really hatch new businesses. There's that. There's something going on at our Curry School for Education. They're launching an incubator of their own. We have a Batten School for Leadership and Public Policy. The Public Policy School has a faculty member and a cohort of people who are actively engaged in social entrepreneurship. the idea behind the iLab was, yes, to integrate these. I mean, not in any sense of there needs to be sort of everyone needs to be doing everything at the iLab, but to create one more opportunity for engagement across the departments. We're so delighted to see activity all over the place, and we ought to coordinate and communicate. But by providing facilities that enable a more organic engagement, that's the thesis behind, putting funds and resources into something like that.
Okay, honestly speaking, I know I'll keep you late for lunch for 1 minute, but I have an important question. You mentioned something about a safety net, and you gave an example of tenureship position for a professor. Mm-hmm. But like, what are practices or measurements for safety nets for students or for untenured professors? So if you can highlight this like in 1 minute or so.
Yeah, so on one level for faculty, I'll be brief because I know everyone is probably low on blood sugar. With faculty, it is a policy question. So, at our school, certainly at the Darden School, faculty are, whether tenured or not, are allowed to take 20% of their time for any activity, consulting or what have you. And so if they want to devote that to doing startups, great. At a business school, maybe because we're a business school and because we value entrepreneurship, if we have faculty, we have a few right now who are launching new businesses, it's rewarded. In fact, it's celebrated. And that gets back to that notion of there being role models. So the more as an institution because this gets to it's a more subtle way of talking about a safety net. If you celebrate the faculty who want to go off and do these things, it then is safer for the rest to say, oh, I can try that too. As for students, that's what the iLab is actually all about. It's an opportunity for them to fail. My partner who runs this, who runs the incubator, he's a former venture capitalist, and he never wants to fund anybody who hasn't failed at least 3 times. This is a way to fail safe before they go off into the real world.
Okay, thank you very much for Dr. Carr, and thank you for the audience.